Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan. And today I have a very special guest, Stephen Joseph, my dear friend. And he is an executive coach for senior executives. And he is also a catalyst for dropping the ego and leading from the heart. Please welcome Stephen. Welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Really great.
Oh, good. It's great to have you here. So why don't we just start by you sharing a little about your story into becoming a coach for senior executives and your style and your practice and what that looks like.
Well, I started a long time ago before people knew about executive coaches. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know what to call it till someone on an airplane said, "Hey, you sound like a coach." But what I had done was I started the Massachusetts Institute of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, in the late 70s. And so I was running programs like that, and I noticed I had a lot of corporate clients as well as teaching clinical skills to psychotherapists that pertain to, hypnosis and NLP. So I began getting very interested in business people, and that's how I started out. I was at this juncture point where I thought, I could get an MBA, or I could simply model successful business people. And so what I would do is I would ask owners of companies if they had employees that produced at, a multiple of 10, say, compared to their other employees, and they didn't know why, and that they would like more of that in their company, either by selection or training. And then they'd say, sure, we've got one of those. And usually it was in sales. And I would follow them around and model what they did. And then set up training programs and selection based on what I found. So that's how I got into coaching and how I learned about business. And then the other part of the story is I've been, for 55 years, 2 or 3 hours a day, I've been practicing Tai Chi, Qigong, and meditation. Actually, the first 17 years was of yoga, but it's always been some serious pursuit of improving the human condition through what people have done for centuries. So I've studied different systems, but I'm always looking for what is the common transformational element. And then those two pathways in my life really converged because I got interested in what makes mature and seasoned leaders. And so I started studying and writing about adult stages of psychological development and how a leader being at one stage or another impacts their capacity to lead. So, just the way kids are different at 2 than they are at 5, than they are at 12, cognitively and emotionally. It's the same thing with adults. We go through stages too, but they don't as much automatically come with age. So you can know a leader who's 50 years old and who's no more sort of sophisticated, kind, aware, emotionally intelligent than they were when they were 20. And then you can meet other people who have matured beautifully. And then the question is, how can you use coaching to make that evolution happen? And that's where we get to the whole idea of using your role at work to make that happen. So I'm starting to worry that I'm getting very abstract, but I'll get less so as we go.
Yeah. No, well, let me try to summarize what you said just to see if I got it clear. And
good luck.
The basis of what I was hearing is you've been coaching executives in the corporate setting for a long time, but you've also been this mind-body practitioner for decades and decades with the Tai Chi and meditation and Qigong, which is a huge, and they eventually converged, and which I think is important because that helps leader if they develop this mindfulness and awareness of themselves to be better leaders. Is that kind of a summary of what
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, good.
Good for you, Alice.
That's what I do for my job. But I'm curious, how you help them, like how to use work as a path and all these techniques and tools to help a leader develop and evolve and mature. Yeah. Like, what's your process look like?
Well, one thing I usually always ask people, and you can think about this for yourself, both of you and all the listeners, is what circumstances have you engaged in where you felt like the problem in front of you to solve or the challenge to meet was an exact match for what you loved, kind of a sweet spot. Like, I was born for this. This is great. This kind of problem is the kind of problem I love to solve. And, I think about it, I dream about it, and I'm good at it. And so, for instance, I recently asked a female executive that question. She said when she coached Little League, a bunch of 10-year-old boys, that's when she really learned how to connect with people and how to motivate them as a team and really build the spirit of a team and stuff like that. And she still does that, but she does it in corporate America. And so it's good to understand that about yourself, like what you love. And then there's another aspect too, is the fit for that with respect to the role that you may occupy or want to occupy. So there's a joke about a guy who goes to a tailor to get a suit fitted, and he comes back, the tailor has made the alterations, and he tries on the suit jacket, and the right hand is very, the sleeve isn't long enough, and the left hand is draping down over his knuckles. And he says, you got to fix this. And the tailor convinces him that he's just standing wrong. And so he adjusts his posture, and now he's walking down the street, and a friend stops him and says, wow, what a beautiful suit. And the guy says, yeah, just got it. And he said, where'd you get it? And he said, well, there's a tailor up the street. And he said, good, because if he can fit someone as misshapen as you, he must be a genius. But the whole idea of we try to fit ourselves into roles and we distort ourselves. And on the other hand, you don't want the suit to fit exactly right. I heard from one executive, he was saying, if you're in the middle of a project and you know exactly how it's going to come out and you're confident of every step and you've got it all planned, your project isn't big enough. So the idea of tackling things that make you grow, is really important. And when people occupy their roles, when we're growing up, we go through stages where we're trying to be heroes in our own drama. So our sense of self and self-worth is based on being able that stuff. And if you listen to people in business, one of the complaints that they have about colleagues is that that person wants to be the smartest guy in the room or the smartest person, but confidentially, it's usually guy in the room. And that is a stage, a heroic stage where you're demonstrating that you're the smartest person or that it was your idea, that you led the charge. And when people come up with ideas that are different, that could expand your idea of what to do, if you're at that solidly at that heroic stage, you dismiss their ideas. But if you get to the post-heroic stage, and the first one, my co-author Bill Joyner and I called the catalyst, you get to a catalyst stage, that's when you really get interested in the other person and their idea, and where you're capable of saying, I never thought of that, but that's a great idea. What kind of resources can I give you so that you can make it a reality?
Makes a lot of sense. And I was just going to ask, kind of following up on what you just said. You've been talking about stages a little bit. I think we got a piece of them a little bit. Could you also give just an overview of some of these different stages that you see, and then maybe how you help people or have seen people transition from one to the next?
Well, I think when the most important ones to understand, there's an expert stage and an achiever stage. And those are the ones where your sense of self is really dependent on, as I said, demonstrating that you know your stuff. And what gets you out of that stage is that it's not scalable very much, because it's as though in your leadership team, whatever it is, your brain is at the hub and everybody else is a spoke, and they're not connected to each other. They just send you messages, and then you, with your fantastic, great brain, figure out the solutions to problems and stuff like that. And that means that you're indispensable. And that means that you can't grow your organization beyond a certain number of people, because you've made yourself indispensable. And so what gets you out of it is exactly that frustration. And also, what gets you out of it is people's complaints about you. So the whole idea is to create, in every interaction in business or in any role you've got, you really got two agendas. One is whatever the subject matter or a problem or solution you're driving. That's one part of the agenda. But the other one is, by the quality of communication, what kind of culture are you building because of how you communicate? And that's where meditation comes in and is really important, because when people start out in meditation, they have complaints about it, which I think are legitimate. One thing is they're mistakenly trying not to think. So that, they get wrapped around their own axle that way. They're busy trying not to think, and then they think, oh, I'm thinking. And I'm even thinking about how I'm thinking. So I guess I must suck at this. And, they hit the eject button at that point. But really, the goal of meditation isn't what's being touted these days, which is mostly stress reduction. You can get better heart rate variability, you can get, all kinds of things, lower your blood pressure, etc. And people are even making bigger claims about health. But ultimately, it's about dropping the self. So then the question is, and that pertains to the egoic stages of leadership, how do you do it? And one metaphor I think of, if you've ever gone to a concert and the orchestra is tuning up, and there's this sense of excitement, and there's a lot of cacophony going on, and people are playing different things all at once, and it's not organized. And then the conductor stands up and taps his baton on the podium. Everything is quiet. And at that moment, there is actually a room sound. It's like the room is kind of pregnant with possibility. It's silent at the same time. And that's a state that's akin to what happens in meditation. You get this kind of wide open space that's continuous inside and outside you, and it's full of potential and energy and vitality. And at the same time, things arise in it, phenomena arise in it, and they drop in it. But the ongoing experience, which is always there, is that big space. And so if you can manage to train your nervous system and your awareness to get familiar with that space and just know that it's there all the time, then meditation becomes a lot easier. And it also becomes, just take that example, as a way of listening to other people. So if instead of, listening to other people like the expert and the achiever listen, which is basically shooting holes mentally in the other person's argument. You're not listening, you're reloading.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, instead of that, you're busy dropping assumptions.
Mm.
And so you listen to the other person and you make an assumption and just note what your assumption is, and then let it go for a while and listen some more and listen some more. And then you can interact and you can trade information about your differing assumptions if that's part of the conversation. But at least the other person got deeply listened to. And when I was in graduate school, I was getting a doctorate at the University of Massachusetts in this department we had created called Aesthetics in Education. And it was about how to teach anything through art, music, drama, and dance.
Hmm.
And the head of the department was this guy named Roland Wiggins, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But Roland was this genius jazz pianist, and he really knew how to listen.
Mm.
So if you talk to Roland, he would say, well, how's your project going? And he'd start talking about it. And then he'd come up with this incredibly penetrating question. And as you were talking, you could watch him kind of take on understanding of what you were saying. It's almost like it affected his body. And then he'd get in this like little state of wonder. And he would say, well, if that's true, then how do you approach this? You know, and all of a sudden he'd take you to this really deep level, and you felt totally supported by him. And I've seen senior leaders in corporations operate that way. It's not a lot of them, but they do. And they're amazingly effective.
That sounds incredibly powerful. And I really love the music analogy, because it is kind of like that quieting allows space to open. And it is kind of, I like how you brought in the mind-body connection meditation of just letting go of the ego, letting go of the self, so you can actually be present to the possibility of anything coming into that space, to be open and receptive and to listen to what that employee might be expressing. Or, you know, it could be such an incredible idea that didn't even occur to you, and it could just create so many different possibilities and just opportunities. Because, you know, if we hold on to our ego being like, I have to be that person that solves all the problems, it's really very limiting. Because it's like your brain, you know, it could be a magnificent brain that is a great problem solver, but, you know, imagine adding 10 brains to the problem solving, or 20 brains. It could just expand to so many possibilities that way.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Alice. And you know, it's not the only way to lead a corporation successfully. I mean, Steve Jobs didn't do it that way. I never met Steve Jobs, but what I've heard about him is, if you don't get in an elevator with him, because if you get in at floor 2, by the time you're at floor 4, you'll be fired. And
why?
And because he would have quizzed you very deeply on whether you were actually executing his vision or not. And if you weren't, you were out. And, you know, the same thing they used to say about Bill Gates. You know, you didn't really get your stripes at Microsoft unless he had screamed at you, you just don't get it. And what it was his vision of the place. So you can lead that way. You could be very successful. But what your life is like, that's a whole different story. And also the rewards of meditation. If you think imagine you're standing outside a room, you don't know what's in it, and you're curious, but it's all dark. There's no illumination. So what you'd like to do is you'd like to take in a clear light and shine it around and see where things are and what's there. But we don't have a clear light. What we've got is a slide projector, little scenes from our own life that we're projecting onto. We don't see it as it is. We see it through our filters and our impositions and projections of what we think, what we believe, etc. But if just like in the sort of the auditory metaphor, you can also do that visually and with all senses. And so the idea is to be fully alive. And that means not trying to escape what is actually there. And part of what's there is also being able to look at your own reactions as they arise and own them, understand them, but not have them rule you. And so, the whole idea is not to use meditation as a state you get into to bypass your reactions to the world. It's more like to integrate them, tolerate them, to lovingly and tenderly acknowledge them, but not to avoid them. So a lot of people also approach meditation in that way too, as a way to just get into a state that, they could also get into a state by smoking a joint, or, there are all kinds of ways to change your state. But this is a way to be fully alive with you as you are, responding to the world as it is, and and to just be present with it.
So along those same notes, I kind of had a question around, because you're saying, a lot of people approach meditation from a very, I guess, health-oriented perspective as opposed to an ego dissolution perspective. What are some of the differences? Like maybe we can go through an example, because you've been kind of talking a little bit in terms of the approach or the way of thinking about it. But let's say that, I sit down and I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to meditate. What could I think about, or maybe what direction should I take? Because I think, if you're just starting and taking it from this approach, it might be, one, you might not have meditated at all before, but two, people might be focusing, like you're saying, on the state. So if I'm trying to work on resolving my ego and working through some of the emotional states and whatnot, do you have any suggestions for a starting point?
Yeah, well, a lot of meditation systems have a common focus on the breath. So no matter what you're doing, and for a lot of times that's the anchor that your system has. You can check into your breathing and just see how agitated you are or how smooth it is. But you get to a point where in practicing meditation, if you're concentrating on your breath, so let's say that you're taking the breath in and then it goes out. And then let's say that at the top of the breath, at an inhale before it turns to an exhale, there's a little point that's neither an inhale nor an exhale. It's just free and still. So then you kind of focus on that stillness. And then it's also there at the turning of the breath from an exhale to an inhale. And then what you discover is it's there all the time. And so that's the perception of this kind of still place. And then the perception of space, where let's say that you're doing Qigong, and which is very wonderful for health. And there's something called a central channel that runs from your perineum, which is between the genitals and the rectum at the base of the torso. So there's a spot there and a spot at the top of your head. And it's like this column of energy. So now you can breathe up that column of energy and then breathe down that, and imagine the energy rising and falling. At first it's imagination, but eventually the energy really is moving in that way. And then you can imagine that has that stillness in that space and that kind of aliveness because it has the breath. So then you can imagine it expanding to the boundaries of your skin. Now it's going up and down with the breath, say, and this is just one of many meditations. And then maybe it goes out into your etheric field on the inhale as well. So it's going out, it's coming out and going back. And then you can also get the feeling that that space that's outside you in your field and inside your skin is continuous space. So there's that feeling. And then you can add to it, these are just little flavors. You say that you've been, feeling down in the dumps. And what you really need is a sense of gratitude and appreciation for the people in your life. So in many systems, and also in Qigong, the heart center, or the middle dantian, it would be called, is the place from which it's easiest to experience those feelings of love and appreciation. So you go there, you can use the body, you can take the outer corners of the eyes and let a smile establish itself there and feel like you're smiling into the heart center. And that as you breathe out or as you breathe in, doesn't matter, you can do it either way, that smile is kind of going out into the world and it's coming back into you. And that's a way of taking that space inside and out and flavoring it so that you're being nourished by the breath and the space as you meditate. And so in that meditation, you're using, the breath is going to nourish you. It's going to support your health. Breathing that way from the heart center is going to be, as heart math people are fond of saying, that it alters the heart rate variability. The dropping into the space inside and out is a beginning way of understanding kind of a sense of self that goes beyond the body. It's as though there's one universal self that is you. And so the beginning instructions for people are to rest in the space that's continuous inside and out. But pretty soon you figure out you're not resting in the space, you're resting as the space. That as you become more and more familiar with it, that space becomes more of your identity. That's who you are. And that's, and the Tibetans are very good at teaching people that. And they call meditation just becoming familiar with that space. Mm-hmm. So the more familiar you are, and the more you think, that's me, that's who I am. And who I am includes you and includes objects. And, that space is indestructible and everywhere. And obviously, if you're resting in and as the awareness of that space, there's no ego. But when thoughts and any kind of thoughts arise, there's a sort of toleration of them, because they just represent phenomena arising that arise and fall in that space. But the space, the Tibetans are fond of looking out into the distance in the sky and having a sky-like mind that goes on forever. And that's just one way of doing it. And, the Chinese have their own version, which you get through Taoist meditation, which is what I'm most familiar with.
Wow, that sounds really fascinating. And I like the idea of, especially for newbies to meditation, it's just more of like a practice of creating space and expanding the space and time as you practice more, but eventually to reach a point where it just becomes who you are, which is a beautiful thing. I like. You had mentioned like Qigong and Tai Chi. And in my mind, I kind of just see it as a moving meditation motion. But I'd be curious to hear what distinguishes it, or what's unique about it, that you would recommend it for a certain individual.
Well, I think to do Tai Chi well, or Qigong well, you have to be aware of every cubic inch of your body.
Hmm.
And so that really gets you to occupy your physical space
Hmm.
beautifully. The other thing about the kind of meditation, there are two points on opposite ends of a continuum. There are fire methods and water methods.
Hmm.
Fire methods make something happen. So in terms of Qigong, it's a fire method would be very strenuously bringing energy up your, the governing vessel and down the conception vessel or the microcosmic orbit, and just really creating pathways in your body. That's the fire method, and it's very fast and powerful. But the water method is what I've been taught to rely on, and it's just removing obstacles from the natural pathways occurring. And it's often a deeper healing. So where the fire method can kind of wallpaper over stuff, the water method just gets deeper and deeper. So for instance, in Tai Chi, your hands, your limbs become, it's like one of the elements is, I don't know if you can see this, but the opening and closing of the joints of your fingers. And then at the same time this is happening, it's happening in your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder and your scapula and your spine and down your legs. So when I'm doing this with my hands in Tai Chi, I'm also doing it in my feet. My feet are doing the same thing. I can't shuffle cards with my feet yet, but I'm working on it. So the whole body is moving like this, and because it has, you can feel maybe a spot that's stuck someplace in your body. Maybe it's in your torso, around your chest. And so as you're moving through the Tai Chi form, you can sort of call on this dissolving energy, the kind of heavenly energy that's coming down like a gentle mist that's dissolving all knots and unlocking all spaces. And that would be how you use Tai Chi as a meditation. Not that it's just slow and you're paying attention to it, but also that you're dissolving anything in your body system, your energetic system, even emotions that are coming up, and even systems that are more subtle than that. That what the Tai Chi does is it shows you where you're stuck, but it also, in doing that, also gives you the power to focus on that stuck place and dissolve and have it open all by itself. Just in response to the invitation to dissolve and melt and relax into this field of awareness that's all around and through you. And so that's what's happening when you use Tai Chi as meditation. And some Tai Chi forms, as I've been taught by Bruce Francis, you can find him on energyarts.com. He said that the Wu style of Tai Chi it lends itself best to what I just described, but you can do it with the Yang style, and that's all possible too. Wu's Chen style is a little bit more fiery, but anyway, that's how to use Tai Chi and Qigong is like, if you're familiar with Bagua, which is a martial art, it'll raise a lot of energy, and then when you feel where you're blocked, you just sit down and dissolve. And so Tai Chi becomes a way of calming you down, but it also is a way of rattling your cage, because it shows you where you're locked, and it will rattle your cage.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a tool that I haven't used much. I did take a Tai Chi class once. I don't think I quite made it to the level where things were unlocked or unblocked.
Not rattled.
No, I was definitely rattled, but not for that. Not for the same reason. No, but there were definitely times where I felt, and it's probably at a much lower level, but especially towards the end of that, where I started feeling very in sync with my body and very tuned in to what was
Yeah.
happening, and movements felt very fluid. And like you were saying, it was easy to tell when certain, for me, it was mostly in my body because that's the stage that I got to. But I could tell when certain parts of my body were locked up or not able to move as fluidly and whatnot. And I think it's a really nice tool worth mentioning because I don't think it's especially common, at least in comparison to just static meditation. I guess I'll call it sitting meditation. So I think it's nice to kind of share out that information and give people another idea for an outlet that's in the same vein. Because now that we're talking about it again, and I'm remembering back to what I did, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I actually really want to go try that again now that at the time I didn't have much of a meditation practice. Now I have much more of one.
Yeah.
And
it's one of the things where you really need a good teacher. So I would say, the programs on energyarts.com they've got a really nice setup. So I do, most of the time I'm teaching executives, but sometimes for friends and family, I send them to that site and they learn it, and then I can make little adjustments with them one-on-one. But you don't even need those adjustments. So, if people are listening, I would go to Energy Arts.
It sounds like, what you saw is that for executives to be most effective, right, across teams and to be able to like build a larger team,
yeah,
this ability to step into space and not have your ego override everything and not be in this hero role of I'll take this on, I'll take this on, I'll take this on, is like that's one of the key pillars. And then to unlock kind of that ability or to help move people from one stage to the next, meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong? What is the word? Qigong?
Qigong.
Okay. I've not heard of that before today. So I did a small amount of research, but not enough to know. Anyway, these are all different tools that you can use to kind of open up more of that space. And it's not really about, from what I'm hearing, it's not about using that just as a state or just as a practice in that moment, but to be able to take that into these other realms and use that space to kind of effectively manage your team or get things done or whatever it is that you're working on. Do that at the highest level you're capable of.
Yeah. It's funny that, people get the impression if you only talk about meditation and with respect to executive coaching, people may get the idea that I would be training people to be passive. But, back to roles, there's another role that you have, which is being the guardian of the business entity and making sure that you're doing everything that's just right for the stakeholders and also that you're building and shaping the kind of culture that's going to execute the strategic vision that you have. And that's all part of the deal. But the meditation and doing this kind of being tolerant, sometimes I'll do these sessions with people where they've come to me and they have a difficult conversation or a negotiation that they're going to do with someone else. And so my job is to prepare them for that. So the way I do it is I ask them what they're going to say to the other person, and then I dutifully write down exactly what they're going to say. And then I invite them to be the other person so I can interview them a little bit. So if it was you, Alice, I would say, okay, Alice, who's this other person? You'd say, oh, this is Fred. And I'd say, okay, so be Fred. You can use his tone of voice. You can use his gestures. You try to be in his body. And then I'll just start talking. I'll just say, Fred, this is the first time I've met you. So tell me a little bit about yourself and who's at home. And, and you get more and more into Fred. Those questions are meant, Alice, to get you into that other person's being. And then at some point I say, well, I understand you're meeting with Alice Thursday at 2:00. What's that meeting about? And what's at stake for you in that meeting? What's important to you about it? How would you like it to come out? And then, you would say all that. And then I say, well, I happen to know what Alice is going to say to you. Are you interested in hearing it? So then invariably they say yes. And then I say, well, she's going to, and then I read all the notes that I have about what they're going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably they have the experience of, oh, that could be okay. Oops, that would never work. Oh, I shouldn't say that. And so part of going through these stages is the increased ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So you're helping them develop that. And so when they get finished with that, invariably they've got ideas about how they would approach it differently. And then I also ask them, and I coach them a little bit on that. And then I ask them, is there anything you don't like about Fred? And then, they can say stuff like, oh, he's a self-important jerk. That's what I don't like about him. And then what I do with them is I say, well, imagine you were acting just like Fred. Just imagine that. And then imagine what emotions would have to be present inside you to drive that kind of behavior. What would get you to do that? How would you have to feel inside to act like Fred? What would you be afraid of? Because often they're protecting themselves in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and then I say, where do you feel that in your body? And then use meditation techniques to dissolve all that. So as soon as they dissolve that in themselves, it's much easier and accept it in themselves. It's much easier to tolerate it in Fred. So it's easier to talk to Fred because he doesn't bother Alice anymore.
That sounds great.
But that, and then often I teach them to say, in preparation for this meeting, Fred, I've been thinking about it, what it must be like to be in your position. And here are some of the things I've thought of. And, tell me if I'm right or wrong about those. And I'll offer the same kinds of things from my end. And let's see if we can put all our cards on the table and come up with a solution that works for both of us. Do you want to proceed that way? And sometimes people don't, but at least you made the offer.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, I can really see putting yourself in another person's shoes and just seeing it from their perspective can really open a lot of insight into how to interact with that individual.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the other part is to soften the whole projection thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is, I think that's really important to do.
Oh, definitely. Because I think if you go into a conversation expecting them to be a jerk, then they're gonna be what you kind of put in because you're acting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you can come in more neutral, it can create more space to allow more to be possible.
Right. And then the other part of it is, if you're thinking he acts like a jerk in this way, I would never do that. If you just get rid of that.
Yes.
As in the right circumstances, we can all be like Fred.
Right. Absolutely. Great. Well, Stephen, it's been such an honor to have you on our show. You always have such great wisdom and insight. I'm sure a lot of people got a lot out of it. And yes, if there are any executives out there needing support in maturing, Stephen's your man. Is there anything you'd like to share or plug, Stephen, before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm interested in lately is just working with large teams and organizations in big companies. And, I'm doing that. I don't want to say who my clients are because I don't have permission to do that. But that's where I found I can add a lot of value these days. So if anyone is interested in connecting with me around that, you can just go to my LinkedIn site, Stephen Josephs, and then we can connect from there.
Yeah, sounds great. And they can also find you on your website,
StephenJoseph.com. Right.
Right. That link will be in the description too for anyone interested.
Yeah, good.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on our show.
Well, thank you. It's fun to talk to you too. It's a delight.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.